Hey guys, Pedro here to tell you about the latest from Marduk, Memento Mori, out September 1st on Century Media Records. The album has 10 tracks, 42 minutes in length, and this is the band's 15th full-length studio album. They are a Swedish black metal band. As far as the design goes, this album has two different outlooks, or two different styles. On one hand, it allows the outros of songs to bleed out and become the intros of other tracks, creating a very good sense of fluidity but also a connectivity between songs. But there's other moments within this record where a track abruptly ends and then a track abruptly starts, creating a little bit of a void in between songs. Having these two approaches together in one single album makes the overall flow or the overall experience of listening to this record a little bit jarring, because as you get used to the fluidity, as you get connected with the experience, that stops and there's that break, that divide. Then you start to get connected again with the experience, you start to see the flow happening again, and then that break happens again and that flow stops. This takes nothing away from the quality of the individual songs, but it definitely hurts the overall flow of the album as a whole. As far as the sound is concerned, this is an album that connects with the DNA of the band extremely well. But it's an album that has a lot of little nuances in the soundscape that make this album feel very rich. It has a lot to offer. It's not your prototypical black metal album from that perspective. It goes a little bit beyond that and adds value to the core sound of the band and to the core experience of listening to black metal, making the album feel slightly bigger. Now, when you look at this record and when you look at the sound of this record, you have to look at three different layers that the sound has. The first layer comes together with drums and guitars. Perhaps the drums taking a little bit more of a forefront movement in that layer because the brutality, the heaviness, the punchiness, and the thickness of the sound starts with the drums. The drums have a lot of volume on this album. They're very powerful, they're very heavy, and when it comes to building a wall of sound, the first couple of bricks are definitely coming from the drums. But the guitars also tie up really well with that drum sound, allowing the overall thickness of that wall to be a little bit more predominant, allowing that wall also to be a little bit higher with a lot more breaks on it. So that first layer is really about how impactful that drum sound is, how thick, how much depth that drum sound also has, and then the guitars matching up with it and allowing that experience to be magnified. The second layer comes from the guitars offering the other side of the coin, being more driven, more penetrating, more melodic at times, creating a dark, somber atmosphere that matches really well with that roughness, with that thick wall of sound that is up top. The two, when they coexist in a way that you're still able to see them separated, but you can see the lines becoming very blurry in terms of where they meet. Now, this is an album that overall, from a soundscape point of view, the edges of the sound are not clear. There is some roughness around the edges, there's some distortion around the edges that adds to the overall essence of the band and definitely adds to the overall essence that this album puts forward. It may feel like an imperfection at first, but it's all part of the atmosphere that the album creates. Now, the last layer of this record is the bass. And the bass really impressed me. I was not expecting the bass to be this impactful in this album. You're gonna hear the bass on every single song. Now, the key interesting thing about this album for me is that the bass became more noticeable once I got to Charlatan. That song made me realize how impactful the bass was. So the next time around when I was listening to this record, knowing what that song did, the light switch went off. When I heard that song, that light switch definitely went on, and I could detect that bass a lot clearer from that point forward. So then going back to the beginning and listening to the album all over again, knowing what I knew, it allowed me to see this record differently. The bass really pops on every single song, more predominant on some than others. Charlatan is perhaps the one where the bass really comes into the forefront and lets you know that it's there. But once again, you go back to the beginning, you listen to every single song, and it's there. Sometimes it works almost as a secondary guitar, riffing with the song, playing the main melody and the main riff of the track, but on bass in a very subtle way. Some songs, not so subtle, but that ability to have the bass as the bottom layer really adds depth to the overall sound experience. So when you think about this album and you see how driven, how penetrating it is, normally black metal albums that have that sort of experience, they become super narrow. This record doesn't. The bass almost works in a way that it becomes the elastic of the sound. It pulls the top layer away from the bottom layer, and it creates this incredible depth, this incredible footprint between all the different layers, allowing the album to still have all of the experience of a great black metal record, but have a much different experience, a much richer experience, and a much wider sound experience at the exact same time. As far as the vocals are concerned, I really enjoy the vocals on this album. I enjoyed the little nuances here and there in songs like Shovel Beats Scepter, for example. That spoken word was really cool. Elements like that really change the dynamics of songs without changing too much of the DNA of the album itself. But the vocal performance was very consistent. Definitely an element that added brutality, an element that added darkness, an element that plays really well into the atmosphere of the record, and then it plays really well into the overall sound experience that this album provides. It's the perfect glue that holds all of the other pieces together, allowing this album to be a great record. And you have to wonder, after 15 releases, if you include this one, how these guys continue to stay motivated and create albums of this level of quality. Outside of the design, which I'm not a huge fan of, this record musically is flawless. The songs are phenomenal. I don't mind that roughness around the edges for an album like this, for a band like this. It adds so much character to the sound. Black metal is not supposed to be super polished, or at least not when it comes to Marduk. And this record definitely is not polished, but it's very rich in terms of the sound that it gives you. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with the opening track, the title track, Memento Mori. I love the intro. This song in this album needed a song that has this sort of introduction to what the record is all about, and this track definitely does that. I mean, when you think of the title of the album, the title of the track, having the intro, opening song, the stars are aligned, everything is coming into place. It's a track that builds up from that intro into the song that it becomes. Very driven, heavy, thunderous wall of sound in this track, definitely with the drums and guitar punching through together as one, but still having that melodic side, or that more driven and penetrating sound side, still present in the overall song. A thin bass layer marks the bottom of the layers, and then the vocals bring the intensity into the track. In my opinion, it is a great opening song because of all the things that I just explained. The title track, the intro to the song, how driven it is, and then closing off with a very intense and killer riff. It's the perfect exclamation mark on the start of any record, but specifically this one. Then I have to mention Charlatan. This is by far my favorite song on the album. Is the song in which the light bulb went on. Is a song where I really noticed the impact of the bass, and the impact that the bass has not just on this track, but on the overall record. I can't remember the last time I heard a black metal album that had this much bass, and that the bass played this much of a role in the overall experience. And this song, because of what it did for me, it became glued, it became tattooed in my brain, and it's very hard for me to listen to this album and not pinpoint this track as one of the best tracks that it has to offer. The bass sounds phenomenal. There's like a second guitar there. It's just riffing. It's riffing with the song. It's riffing with the melody. You know, it's really incredible. Almost something out of a prog album and a black metal record. I love the experience that it gives. It gives so much depth to this song. It gives so much depth to the overall sound. It allows the track to have these melancholic dips, that the sound has when it's not as penetrating, when it's not as driven, when it's not as heavy. That's when the bass really pops. That's when the bass really comes into the forefront, and you're able to see it, you're able to digest it, you're able to appreciate it, allowing you to feel all the different layers, all the different texture that this song has. The dark, the melodic and melancholic, and the heavy. It's all there. They just made it in a way that it's easy for you to process it with the right ebbs and flows throughout. Last but definitely not least, Marching Bones. I love the marching at the beginning. This is another song that has a great intro. They do intros on this track, on this album, really well, playing off of the theme of the song, playing off of the title of the song, and this one is no different. That intro of the marching boots, you hear the boots, really cool for a song that has that as its essence. And then it's another track that has a killer bass sound throughout. Not as impactful, perhaps not as much in the forefront, not as much riffage as far as when you compare it with Charlatan, but still really great impact from the bass, allowing the overall sound to be that trademark sound of Marduk from beginning to end. A track that doesn't change too much once it gets going. Once you move past that intro, it stays very consistent, it stays very linear from start to end, but it has such great movement, it has such great forward thinking movement that it's impossible not to enjoy it. That intro also sells you on the rest of the song. It sets the tone from an atmosphere point of view for what the song delivers down the line. I love this track, I love the combination. The intro really adds value to how the song becomes and how you perceive it. This is it, Marduk with Memento Mori, out September 1st on Century Media Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.